One of the great things about Filament is that you're not obligated to use the panel builder to create your application. In fact, let me show you how you can create a small application using just the table builder and one full page Livewire component. Let's start with a fresh Laravel project. Laravel new, and let's call our project medications. We're going to create a small list of medications that has to be taken in a certain interval. We are not going to use any starter kit, and even though we're not going to do any testing, let's just choose pest either way. And because I'm going to share this code with you after the fact, I'm going to initialize a Git repository. And for this example, we are going to use SQLite for the database. Now let's cd into our project folder. And now let's create a new model class. We're just going to use one model class for this project. So let's do PHP artisan make model, and let's call it medication. And let's use the M flag to create a migration file. Now let's open the project in VS Code and let's start working on the migration file. Let's open our migration file, which is located inside database, migrations, create medications table. And let's create a string column for the medication name. And then another column. This one will be a small integer for the dosage. And then another string column for the medication type. And one more for the interval. Okay, that should be enough. And before we run our migrations, I'm going to delete the default migration since I'm not going to use any authentication in this project. Now let's open a terminal right here in VS Code and run our migrations. Yes, I would like to create a new database file. Okay, that takes care of the database. Now we need to install our dependencies, and we are going to start with the Filament Tables package. So let's use composer require Filament Tables. Let's use the version 3 stable. And finally use the W flag to install all related dependencies. And as you can see, with that command, we already have Livewire version 3. Next, we need to run PHP artisan filament install tables. And we are going to use the scaffold option to create a Livewire template file and also to take care of the Tailwind CSS configuration. Do not use the scaffold option if you're working on an existing project, because this is going to override a bunch of files. And of course, if you haven't done so already, go ahead and show some love by starting the Filament repo on GitHub. I've already done this, so I'm going to choose no. Now let's install our local dependencies using bun install. If you don't have bun, you can use npm instead. Now let's start a vdev server using bun run dev. Again, if you don't have bun, use npm. Now let's create a full page Livewire component that is going to house the entire application. For this, I'm going to create a new terminal and then run PHP artisan Livewire make list medications. This command creates two files. First one is listmedications.php located in app Livewire, and this is the component class. And the second one is the component view located in resources, views, Livewire, and it's called list-medications.blade.php. So let's open the last one so that we can add some content to the view and then test it in the browser. So let's navigate to resources, views, Livewire, list medications. And for now, let's just remove this and then add an h1 with a class of text extra large and font medium. Before we can test this in the browser, first we need to create a route for our new component. So let's navigate to routes and let's open web.php. And let's remove this callback function from here and instead use the new component. Now I'm going to open a new terminal and then run PHP artisan serve. Let's navigate to the browser and refresh. And we have the medications title, but I do want this to be a little bit more centered on the page and with some padding on the top. So let's go back to the list medications play.php and add a few classes to the root div. Let's start with wrapper. On small devices, I want this to have a full width, so W full. And in medium to large devices, I want this to have a max width of 5XL. To center it on the page, let's use MX Auto. And then for the padding, let's use padding top 20 and then padding X 4. And thanks to the VDev server, we have automatic refresh. Okay, that's looking better. And now we are ready to add a filament table to our full page Livewire component. First, let's open our component class, which is located in app, Livewire, listmedications.php. And in order for our component to handle filament tables, first we need to implement a couple of contracts. First one is called has table. And because we are going to need a form to edit and create records, we are also going to implement the has forms contract. And in order to implement all of the methods that these two contracts require, we're going to use a couple of traits. First one is called interacts with table, and the second one is called interacts with forms. Now we need a function where we configure our table schema. So let's create a public function called table. This is going to receive the table object, and it's also going to return that table object. And in here we just need to return table. And this is very similar to any other filament projects where we define our columns. And since we have a problem here, why are you complaining? Oh, I see. It's because we imported the wrong contract here. This is not from tables actions, it's just from tables contracts has table. Now, in order for our table to interact with our model, we need to pass the query builder to that model. And we use the query method for this. Now all we need to do is go back to the components view and then render the table. And now we have an empty filament table right below the medications title. And since we're here, let's add some separation between the title and the table. To do that, let's add a section and let's give this a padding top of 4. And then put the table inside. Now let's modify the table so that we can have a header action to create new medications. Back in our list medications component, first of all, let's use filament tables. And then down here in the table method, let's introduce the header actions method. This will take an array. And now let's create a new action with tables, actions, create action, make. This is one of the pre-built actions that come with Filament. And for this to work properly, we need to use the model method and then pass the model class. In this case, the medication class. We are going to need a form schema. And if we save this as is, we can see that we have a new medication button in the corner. And by default, this will show the form in a model pop-up. But since we don't have any fields in the form, if you try to click on it now, it's going to try to submit that form without any data. So let's go back to the form schema and add a new form component. First, let's make an import up here and let's say use filament forms. And then down in the schema, let's use forms components, text input, and let's make one text input for the medication name and make that required. Okay, let's save this and try that button again. And now we actually get a model pop-up with a text input for the medication name. But I want this form in a slide over section on the right side. So let's go back to the component here. And to the action, let's add a new method called slide over. And now when you click the button, the form will open in a slide over window. Let's add a few more inputs to this form. So let's go back to the schema and let's add another component. This will be for the medication dosage and will also be required. Since the input is going to be a number, let's add the numeric validator. Now let's add another input, this time for the medication type. For this, we are going to use a select input. We're going to make this required. We are going to use a non-native select using native false. And then we're going to provide the options for the select. So let's say that the supported medication types are tablets, capsules, and injections. We're going to need another select for the interval. So I'm going to copy this and paste it just below it. I'm going to remove the options for now. And I'm going to add a prefix for my input. And since this is going to have a lot of options, I'm going to make it searchable as well. And because when you use a searchable method, you also make the select non-native, we don't need this call here. Now for the interval, I want to give the user the option to select between 1 and 30 days. And because I don't want to create that array manually, we can go back up here and I'm going to create an array programmatically. Let's start by creating a new variable called interval options. And let's initialize that with one entry, like so. And this will be the option when you need to take the medication every day. Now for the rest of the options, let's use for. Let's say day equals to day less than or equal than 31. So we are going to go up to 31 days and then day plus plus. And here we create the rest of key value pairs in the interval options variable. And here we're going to use the day variable and then the word days. And the same thing for the label. And now we can use this for the options array. Okay, let's see how that looks. We have name, dosage, medication type, and the interval with the selection of 1, 2, 3, and up to 31 days. And you can type your own value here and then select it. Now let's modify the layout of this form to make it a bit more compact. For this, we are going to use a grid. So go back here to the beginning of the form schema and let's use forms, components, grid. This grid will have 3 columns and then use schema. And we are going to place all of the other form components inside the schema of the grid. I want the name component to be full width on the grid. So let's use column span full, and then dosage, type, and interval will each occupy 1 column. And I forgot to use the make method here. Okay, let's see how that looks. And as you can see, we have the name in one row and the dosage, type, and interval in another row. Let's try to create one medication. Let's say ibuprofen. The dosage will be 1. Then the type will be tablet. And let's say that we want to take that every day. Looks like we're missing an import in our component. So let's go ahead and fix that. And it looks like we have a typo here, right here in the model for the form. Okay, let's try to create that medication again. And now we have a different problem because Filament is trying to use mass assignment to create a new record, but the model does not have any fillable fields. So let's go back to the medication model and fix this real quick. Let's add a new property, protected fillable, and let's add the name, type, dosage, and interval. Okay, let's try this one more time. And the record is created, but since we don't have any columns on our table, we can't see it. So now it's time to work on our table and add the necessary columns. Let's go back to our leads medication object and look for the table schema. And here in the columns, let's start by adding one column for the medication name. This will be a text column. Let's save this and see how it looks. And we can see our medication name. Let's add the rest of the columns. Let's make one more for the dosage. And now we can see the dosage number of 1. But what I want to do with this column is combine the values of dosage, type, and interval, so that the column will read 1 tablet every day, for example. So let's go back to the table, and instead of using the value, I'm going to use format state using. And in here, I'm going to use a callback function where I'm going to inject the medication record. And here we are going to return a new string. I'll start with the value of dosage, which comes from the record. And then I'm going to concatenate the value of the medication type. But I want the medication type to be in the correct plural form based on the number of dosages. So I'm going to use the string facade helper from Laravel and then call the plural method. And let's make sure to import that facade first. This is located in Illuminate, Support, and then str. And this function takes two parameters. The first one is the string that we want to turn into a plural. In this case will be record type. And the second one is the number that is going to be used to determine if the type is going to be a plural or not. In this case, it's going to be record dosage. And then finally, I'm going to concatenate the interval, adding the word every, and then record interval. Okay, let's save this and see how it looks. All right, that looks good. The only thing I don't like is that the word day is capitalized, but not tablet or every. So let's fix this so that tablet and every are also capitalized. For the medication type, what we can do is wrap this whole thing with the UC first method, and that will turn the first letter into a capital letter. And since this is a static string, we can just turn this into a capital E. And that looks way better to me. Now let's try creating a new medication. And this time the dosage is going to be 2 capsules every 2 days. And as you can see, the medication type is plural because the dosage is greater than 1. The next thing we do is the ability to edit our medications. And for that, we're going to use an edit action for every row. So in the table, we're going to need an actions method. We're going to put it here before the header actions. This will take an array. And let's start with the edit action. This will also be a slide over form. And we also need to provide a form schema. But here's the thing, I don't want to have to copy the form schema from here into here because that is going to make the code a little bit bloated. And since the form schema is going to be the same in both cases, I'm going to create a service class that is going to provide or return the form schema for me. Let's begin by creating a new class. First, I'm going to create a new folder inside app, and let's call it services. And inside the services folder, let's create a new file called medication form. Let's start with the namespace, app services, and then use filament forms, and then our class. And this class will have only one method called schema. And let's make it static. We're going to return an array. And now all I have to do is go back to the list medications component and grab the form schema from the header actions. So copy this and then return it here. And also I'm going to need the interval options variable. So let's go back here and grab the code from up here. Copy that and then paste it here. Now I can go back to the list medications component, remove this code, and then in the form schema, I can take all of this off and then call medication form schema. Let's save this and see if we have any problems. Let's try the new medication button and everything is working as expected. Okay, now let's work on the edit action. All we need to do is on the form schema, call the medication form schema again. Okay, let's give that a try. Let's click on edit and let's try making an update. Change the dosage to 3 and the type to tablet and the interval, let's make it 3 days. And yeah, as soon as we click save, the record is updated. All that is left is to create an action to delete a record. And this is extremely simple. Just go back to the list medications component in the actions array. Let's add one more. And this time we're going to use the pre-built delete action. And once you save that, you have a new button here for every row to delete the record. And as soon as you click it, you get a confirmation. And if you say confirm, the record is gone. And that is how you create a small application with all the features using one full page Livewire component and a filament table. As always, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.